Bruce, try talking again, please.
Yeah, I'm looking at my.
Okay.
It's better.
7, Candy.
How is this? Is this better?
Yes.
It's better.
Yeah, go ahead. Okay, we're going live soon.
Oh, here we go.
All right, we're on TV. And it's 7 o'clock, so I'm gonna get started. So, good evening, everyone. I take off my mask now for the meeting. Welcome to the Monday, May 18th, 2020 regular Board of Selectmen meeting. And we'd like to start with our call to order. We'll start in the same seating order that we always go in, and that would be Candace,
Candace Bouchard,
Otter Salashi.
Melissa Bird,
Bob Geiger.
Candy Perez,
Sheila Sedlak.
Jack Bork.
Thank you. That was Steve Sedlak. And
Linda Graffo,
thank you very much. Will you please join us for our Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, thank you, everyone. Our next item is, as this is a regular meeting, agenda review. Is there anything from anyone? Hearing none, may I have a motion to approve the minutes of our regular meeting of May 4th?
so moved.
Thank you, Candace. Is there a second? Thank you, Linda. Anybody have any additions, deletions, anything like that? For Sheila, corrections? Okay, thank you. For those of you joining us on Zoom, please be sure to identify yourself if you are on the Board of Education or hold another title, please. Thank you. Next up is item 5, which is citizens' comments. If anyone would like to call in or anybody on Zoom at this point. Remember, we have a phone number, 860-738-6958, regular telephone line for those of you maybe watching on channel 194 or on the live stream. Okay, hearing none, we'll move to the town manager's report. And that would be Mr. Geiger, please.
No, we need to vote.
Oh, I'm sorry, you're right. I went right past that. So, we didn't vote? Okay, my fault. Okay, so all in favor of the minutes? Unanimous. Thank you, and thank you, Candace.
Welcome.
So Bob?
He needs to unmute, Candy.
He's muted? All right, I'll unmute him. I think I'm unmuting him. I'm trying to unmute him. I can't unmute him. Pam, can you get him unmuted?
I couldn't either. I'm trying.
Bob, can't unmute you.
Maybe take your headphones. He took his headphones out. Unplug your headphones.
There we go.
Okay, thank you.
Can you hear me now?
Yep.
I think the headphones did something to it. I'm gonna skip the headphones. All right, let's start with last week. Monday, we had a senior apartment management meeting, which I do frequently for Carriage Maker Place in Laurel Commons. completing some financing arrangements with local.
Your voice is really spotty, just an
All right.
FYI. That's better.
Okay,
That's good.
all right. Tuesday, I met with our police chief regarding an update on a couple citizens' complaints. I also met with our finance director regarding alternate budget plans as we're all trying to anticipate what's coming down with the state funding. And I met with the planning office regarding some of our blight and our permits. As you know, the courts are closed, so it's kind of slowed down some of our blight prosecution issues. We also had a Rotary meeting where I explained to the Rotary what it was like to kind of operate in town hall during these particular quarantine conditions. I also met with Neil Kelsey, who's on our board for our senior management. He's actually on the Winston Housing Authority board as well, discussing, he's our vice president of finance, so we were discussing the issues as we conclude our financing at Laurel Commons. Wednesday had our usual conference call with the governor's office regarding COVID. I must tell you, we have probably 2 or 3 COVID relation meetings a day with one topic or another. Thursday, Jim Rollins and I went to Suckerbrook, and I'll give you maybe a little update on the bridge. We went to examine both the work that's being done for the control of the stream, which is, I don't know, I'm not thrilled about the way the state's completing the project either, but it's coming near completion. But the bridge itself is complete for everything except the concrete ceiling on the sidewalks, on the side. Other than that, we can actually open the bridge right now. Well, that is weather contingent, so we have to have at least 3 dry days. We anticipate having that completed this week. So it's possible the bridge could be open Friday, but more than likely it'll be next Tuesday is what we're shooting for now. But the bridge will then be open, the barriers removed, and we'll be ready to roll again after it's been almost 10 years. I think it was June of 2010 that it was closed. Just so people know, that was an 80-20 project. The state paid for 80%. We paid $180,000 of that. So we're soon to be open. Friday, I met with Civil Preparedness Director Steve Williams regarding COVID-19 issues. I don't know why I have it here for just Friday. I meet with him every morning on those issues. And talk about community updates and messages from the governor. And the other regions. We have 5 regions, which are emergency management regions, so we all share via social media what's going on. I also met with our school superintendent, Molly Brady Shanley, regarding their budget. As you know, we've had some issues with that. This week, I met with Jim Rollins regarding, started off with Jim to get we had a Zoom meeting, I think that was Monday, regarding the school, just as you are aware. Again, and that over, hoping we have an opening committee as we start to begin to open various businesses in town. We are not going to open town hall for probably until June 1st at the earliest right now. We're coordinated on how to do that and control public access to the town. We haven't got everything complete on that yet. Tuesday, I met with Public Works again regarding not only the Suckerbrook Bridge, but we noticed in the parking lot, we just have 67 older vehicles out there. We sold them all. They were all mostly junk, but we did get several $1,000s in. They're all gone. Cleaning up the Public Works yard. If you ever drive by there, you'll notice we've got a lot of cleanup going on around the salt shed, in front and behind it. Then I also had a meeting with James Dombrowski, who's our attorney regarding the senior management financial updates on the Laurel Commons. I had a site visit to John Street regarding neighborhood complaints. I just wish neighbors would respect each other's property and make all of our lives a lot easier.
We're not live
Dog in
streaming.
your own yard or pick up after it, if you really can do that. I had a site visit from Woodland Avenue regarding a drainage issue at the corner of Woodland and the state route, which created some ice problems last winter. We hope to have that corrected soon. We also have some 2 neighbors involved that don't agree on how contractor we hired last year regarding State Park.
Sheila, it's on now.
Kind of pared back some of the work we're going to do given the financial conditions, but we did have to take down one tree, there's
It's on now.
one or two trees that are almost dead right now, and fertilized a couple of the others, so it's doing some work over there. Mark looks pretty good as it is. Wednesday, usually regarding project updates, Overland Road particularly, but we've really got a mess up there. We have to conclude that now, doing that soon. I met with our library. I'm the vice president of our library and have been for about 15 years. But we started doing a pre-opening on curbside service, and it's going very, very well. As a matter of fact, the library business now is up. Our memberships increased a significant percentage as people are looking for things to do. We're issuing more and more library cards and getting very busy, even with curbside. Again, Wednesday met with Public Works on our Woodland Avenue issue, and met with our school superintendent again on some, not really non-budget issues, but things going on with future needs in this COVID situation, the town hall and the school, and how we're going to work together on all of this. I think Melanie's been working with an opening plan with all of the regional schools as well. Again, I met with civil preparedness on the reopening of the parks. Let me talk about that here in a minute. Another governor's conference call. Thursday, we had our Northwest COG meeting, which we do monthly. We did it by Zoom. It worked fairly well. It was a couple hour-long meeting. I also met with representatives of Hitchcock Chair, who the owner now, who purchased the remnants of that a couple of years ago, has an operation in Riverton. He's got one, he wants to expand and move more into the industrial park and is planning on doing so. I had a site visit with one of the neighbors on a particular complaint. I usually meet with 2 or 3 neighbors a week. I met with with a Zoom meeting with our personnel attorney regarding issues relative to some contracts that we're still finalizing. The Board of Selectmen, we had a finance subcommittee that day as well via Zoom. We had a public hearing that was, that was the big one we had that was a 3-hour meeting on Thursday on the Board of Education and town budgets. Friday, I met with our building maintainers. We're trying to prepare for the elections, which are going to be held in the school come November. There's a lot of distancing issues, cleaning issues, pre-voting and post-voting meeting maintenance of the school to make sure everything is clean to begin with and remains clean when we finish. I think there's some grant money involved for our registrars, but we have to get some estimates and do some pre-planning in order to apply for that money. I met with 3 town restaurant owners regarding opening processes. I'm trying to get a feel from them what their issues are. I think the takeout just is not going to sustain restaurant orders in the long run. They need to have some tables and some setups maintained, and each restaurant has different issues. We'll have a lot more to say about that as we proceed with our opening committees. Met with our planning and zoning chairman regarding restaurant opening. He met with me and was particularly concerned about our new place, which is the Little Red Barn, who has been doing well in terms of takeout and carryout, but he wants to open. But as you know, he's had food trucks there, and he didn't want to use food trucks on opening because he didn't want to take business away from the other restaurants. The state law says he has to serve food. So I went around and talked to a couple of the restaurants to explain, because they didn't want him to have food trucks. So we're trying to resolve some of these unintended consequences of the way the law is working right now. I also met with our attorney Nelligan regarding some blight issues. We continue to push that even though the courts are closed. At least we're trying to push it right up to the day the courts opens, because we've got a pretty big pipeline of that to deal with. I met with a site visit on Torringford Street again regarding a continuing issue we've had for years. Behind her house is a very large piece of property that someone has previously used for in violation of inland wetlands in our zoning commission. So let me just tell you a little bit about what we've planned right now on some of the other things. Let me talk about the beach first. We're doing like 2 beaches, Holland and Risha. The requirements are now that we can have no more than 50% of the capacity. Holland Beach is only 25, and now 25 people are allowed on that beach. That's a very small beach. As you go right beside the boat launch. Risha Beach is allowed to have 50. We're posting notices and telling people they have, if they're at all ill, they have to stay home. They have to wear masks when talking outside of where they may be sitting if they go to talk to the guards or people outside of that particular 6-foot area. The guards will each be wearing masks if they get near each other. They will be seated at least 6 feet apart from each other. Frequently they sit side by side. We will have porta potties there. We're asking people to be aware. We'll have places to wash your hands. I think we're going to have some enforcement issues I'm anticipating. I'm sure there are going to be more than 25 people when they come to Holland Beach and more than 50 that want to come to Risha. We're going to start off. We may have to have a police cruiser up there to help. Sometimes our young lifeguards can't handle some of the unruly patrons that insist on exceeding the capacities. We're going to attempt to open some of the parks on the 20th. Tomorrow we're putting up the basketball courts. We took down the basketball rims, and we're going to put those back up tomorrow. We're going to open the skate park and the tennis park. The rules are there's supposed to be a maximum of 5 people until further notice. I'm not exactly sure how to convince 10 teenage boys playing basketball. There can only be 5 of them on the court, but we're going to work on it. We still don't have good rules, neither has the state issued any on the small children's playground area, so we're keeping that closed. It will not open on the 20th. We hope to have it open the week after, once we get more specific rules. There's no real specification on the summer camp yet, but we know there's going to be screening processes for sure. Right now, we plan on having a summer camp. Our rec director has worked with Melanie at Pearson. We're having that, plan on having that June 24th through August the 14th from 7:30 in the morning until 3:30 in the afternoon. That's Monday through Friday. No more than in our normal areas, we won't have any more than 10 children per group, no more than 30 kids maximum, so that means only 3 groups. Normally we have 50 children. We may move one small group. We could probably add down at our green building another group of 10. So we're kind of feeling our way through this as we go, but I'm anticipating since people won't be going anywhere, we're going to have more demand for our camps than we normally do. Don't have all the answers yet, but we're doing more and more planning as we go forward. That's it for the moment. What kind of questions do we have?
When you, I gotta unmute myself. Okay, I just, when you talked about the beach, that's when the lifeguards are on duty. And also other times they should also follow that, correct?
Yes.
But when the lifeguards are on duty, it will be enforced by the lifeguards, and if people are mean to the lifeguards, then the police will be able to go up to the beach and help out?
That's correct.
Okay. Thank you. Linda, I saw your hand up, then Jack, your hand.
Yeah, I was just wondering, Bob, about parking, non-residents that do not have stickers that park along the side streets and use the facilities. Is there going to be any consequence for that or anything in place?
We will have police involvement with that. People still have to get parking passes. They're going to have to send them in. We've had people requesting already. As you know, at Holland Beach, there's only room for about 6 or 7 vehicles. And particularly vehicles that even have a sticker, you can only park in the designated areas. So along the street there, we'll have police involvement again. I anticipate it probably will be more difficult than usual. I've been talking to our police chief. We'll be discussing how we're going to enforce that, but we're going to have warnings issued, and we may have cruisers up there more frequently, just to remind people.
Okay. Thank you.
Jack, you were next.
Bob, I'm pleased that you have some initiatives moving on to the industrial park of the Hitchcock chair. How real is that? Was that just in the initial stages of discussion?
Oh, no.
Which industrial park? The Route 8 or Route 20?
Route 8. Oh, no, I'm sorry, Route 20. The Route 20 park, there's one empty building there. Someone just purchased it. They're having yoga classes in that building. I spoke with him. I actually met with him on Saturday. He lives in Riverton. So we had a discussion at the general store, how we might be able to proceed with that, how we might be able to help him, and how he's going to do that. There was woodworking done in that building before. He's planning on making chair bottoms and chair stays in that building, so it's pretty far along.
Well, that'll be a great sign, an additional business coming to town. Will he remain still working in the Riverton location?
Yes, he will. But his business is definitely down about 30% right now, but so is everyone else's.
Is there any other questions? Candace?
Following that, how is LaPointe's operation moving along on lot 11 there, the first,
Well, I'm aware, all four of those big yellow pieces of equipment, which are very expensive, have been sitting now for 11 days, so I'm gonna have to track him down and say, what are you doing? I don't know what he's waiting on, but you've noticed he's done a lot of work and then stopped. He maybe has other jobs he's working on, he may be waiting for a state permit, I'll find out, but I don't know. I need to find out.
thank you.
Yeah, Bob, I thought part of that was he was looking to develop another entry onto Route 20, and that was still in the works, and he hadn't got that approval from the state yet.
Yeah, he has not. I'm gonna be surprised if he gets it, but he might.
How do we get more information on that application to the state? I want to know how close that is to my property.
Well, it's, I understand. I'll try to get more specific. The guy that's doing the state inspection happens to live in Winstead, so,
Oh,
so we'll see if I can get a little more information from him. He stopped me, last week along the road. I saw him, I pulled over, and he was concerned because we had a construction problem down there when LaPointe was digging. He had cut an electric line which was repaired rapidly, but it was quite disruptive. The state was concerned, so we chatted about that, and I can probably get a hold of him and find out where his plan is to put that, if he can indeed get that.
I don't understand how it's possible.
I don't either.
Anyway, I won't waste anyone's time.
Well, the state guy I talked to wasn't in charge of the permitting process, but he couldn't understand how he could get it either, so.
Yeah,
we don't know yet.
Yeah,
Yeah.
thank you.
Bob, I'd like to go back to one thing you said about the landscaping contractor in the East End Park. I was down there Thursday. The park looked magnificent. Really a good cutting job. The trees look good. And I believe that's the same contractor that's doing the George Dudley West End Park as well as the Soldiers Monument Park. Is that the same contractor?
It's Eric Christensen. You know Eric Christensen? It's Eric Christensen.
I believe that he was up there last week, and he took a look at the monument when we were up there, and it wasn't quite ready, but the park.
It looks good.
Yeah, the East End Park was really good looking, so compliments to that particular contractor.
Yep. I'll tell him that.
Anyone else? Seeing no one at this time, I'll move to item 7, which is the finance director's report. So I'm looking for you on the screen there, Bruce. You got to be there somewhere. There you are.
How's the volume? Is that okay?
Well, you're gonna have to talk loud.
Okay. Well, I'm pleased to provide you with an overview of the general fund results through 10 months of the fiscal year, which represents 83%. Included in your package was the general fund budget versus actual through that 10 months. Property tax revenues are now nearly 100% correct against the budget, which is very similar to where we were last year at this time. It amounts to $23.9 million at April 30th. Again, I want to thank all the taxpayers for their timely payments. Total revenues are at 98% of the budget. We were at 99% last year. This has most likely to do with some municipal aid delays. We did in April receive $3.9 million from the ECS grant, which was on schedule, and we also finally received $300,000 of unmade municipal aid, which normally comes to us earlier in the year, but it didn't come in April. Our total expenditures, 26% of budget, which is comparable to where we were last year. Totals $25.9 million. we are now have in our cash funds $15.5 million at April 30th. Is about where we usually are every year at this time, and will help us greatly as we deal with some of the delays coming out of the COVID-19. So the highlights, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Just one thing, I don't know if it's for you or Bob, but, I noticed that a couple, I think it was Mayor O'Leary in, Waterbury was talking about state grants. Have you heard anything on that? Cause he was talking in the paper about it, and I didn't know if we'd heard anything or not.
You're talking about for fiscal 20 or for the balance of fiscal 19? Fiscal 21.
Fiscal 21.
I have not seen any communications out of the Office of Policy. Governor's budget for fiscal 21.
Okay. Anybody else have any, questions for Bruce? Okay, if not, we'll move on to number 8, correspondence. Was there any correspondence anybody wanted to talk about? Seeing none, we'll move to boards and commissions. Steve?
Okay, we have one piece of action this week. We're taking a second look at Marianne Marino as a candidate for IWWC. This would be the point at which we place her name in nomination, and in 2 weeks, if all of the vetting is complete, we will vote upon her. So that's Marianne Marino as a candidate for IWWC. And I would note that we did receive late today a resignation from Caitlin McSherry from the
Economic Development.
EDC. Yep, thanks very much. And that will be official when it's recorded with the town clerk, but that will be a position that needs to be filled in the future. And that's it for now.
Okay, thank you.
I have one question. On the appointment of Marianne Marino, do we have an expiration of term on that? I don't see it on the issue of membership in the inland wetlands.
Well, there's let's see, there's a couple of vacancies. And it would be up to us to make the placement at the time of appointment in 2 weeks, Jack. I can't tell you exactly where right now, but we'll have that defined in 2 weeks.
Fair enough. Thank you.
Okay, no one else? Okay, now we're going to move to number 10, which is unfinished business, which is the 2020-2021 Town of Winchester budget and public comment. We said that because we were on our Zoom meetings, and we will also be deciding the budget on Thursday, that we would have additional public comment on it. So what I'd like to do is offer up to 3 people to make comments first, if there's anything they'd like to say. That would be the 2 superintendents and the town manager. So I'll start with Tony, if there's any additional comments or anything you wanted to make. You don't have to make comments, but if you'd like to, clarify anything or say anything, we'll go Tony, Melanie, and then Bob.
Just very quickly, I just wanted to emphasize again that this budget does represent an attempt to try to recover from the series of losses that we did encounter at Gilbert. A lot of comments were made regarding teaching staff and reductions. Just wanted to point out that starting back in 2016-17 era, and even prior to that, we did start to cut our teaching staff over the years because of the drop that took place, especially during the time of receivership, when we had a tuition of $6,475,000. We lost 6 teachers. at that particular, over the period of time. Several support staff that included a paraprofessional, a nurse, a secretary, and our community liaison. We also lost an administrator. These were things that were lost because of the circumstances in regard to our budget. I remember we had, prior to this all starting with the receivership and the cuts that occurred, we had proposed a budget that was $8,250,000. Of course, we never got that. We never got that budget way back, fiscal year 2017. So there were, the things that we have to remember is that we ended up, when we had the $6,475,000 budget, my tuition, my budget actually dropped to $7,371,782. That was down almost $900,000, and that was in the fiscal year 2019. So there were significant losses. Granted, we tried to come back last year to try to get our budget to a place where we thought we would be able to operate and maybe restore some of the positions. We never did restore the positions. And I do see us going into this coming year with the possibility of further reductions if, in fact, any continued cuts do come to the education budget, especially in the form of the $240,000. But I didn't want to walk away without mentioning that those factors, because it appeared that we hadn't lost any staffing, but we did indeed lose staffing, quite a bit staffing over the term. So I did do some research, and I was able to gain that information from my research. So I'm going to once again advocate that you do not trim that $240,000 as suggested by the town manager, and that you would return to Melanie's original number. I think it's very important that we return to Melanie's original number, which goes along with the fact that she and I came to this budget number together.
You all set, Tony?
Yeah, just wanted to point out those factors in regard to what we lost over the years.
Well, I have a question for you about those years. What years were those again?
Well, this goes back, as I mentioned the other night.
17,
I never
18,
talked to,
18, 19?
That $8,250,000 number. But that was the proposed projected budget way back in 2017. So we're going back about 4 years. I can also tell you that that's $7,371,782, which was turned out to be the budget for fiscal year 2019, was very close to the budgetary number that existed when the middle school came up to the Gilbert School.
Well, the reason I asked that is because when you mentioned it the other night, I went back and did some research, and in the probate documents, during that time, in 2013 to 15, the international program took in $3.5 million, and between 2016 and 18, the international program brought in $10.7 million. So you had over that time like $14.2 million. So the time you're talking about with the receiver, you guys had the trust for the international tuition brought in over $10.7 million.
Well, I think we need to understand a few things. Number one, the care of these young people has a very large overhead. So they pay a tuition, obviously, to the school, and thank God they did, because as I also mentioned, that the research on the fact that our budget, projected budget, would have gone up $1.25 million. Only 10% was attributable to Winchester. 10%. The trust paid for the lion's share of those increases back in those years. The overhead that the trust has for the care of these students, including the personnel that they hire, is really quite considerable. I remember when I used to do my analysis, there is no profit that is made by the trust. To throw out numbers that the trust, I forget what you said now, 14 million maybe, the trust did not take in $14 million and then store it somewhere. They're paying for these students their food, their housing, monitoring them, transporting them. There are a number of personnel that we have involved, including resident coordinators, including our staff that are involved in directing the program as well as doing admissions for the program. I mean, the blanket statement that, you know, the trust has taken in all this money without the consideration of what it costs to care for these young people is really a story of half story, because you're looking at it from strictly what is brought in, not looking at the other side, which is the care and protection and the education of these young people.
I would ask people to stop chatting, please. They're all showing up and we don't really need to have those out there. But Tony, I guess the other part to that is when you talk about you hired staff to support the international students, right?
The staff that is hired is, of course, hired by the trust.
Right. And
we do have, the trust also pays for staff at the school. For example, ELL, the trust pays for 80% of the ELL teachers in the school. At one time, back when we had 80 some odd kids, we had 3 ELL teachers, and now we have just 2. But the trust is paying for 80%. The trust had hired its own counselor to take care of the kids. Back in the early days, we hired our own tutors as well. So we did have, we have lots of expenses along those lines, but the trust does pay, and it also pays a stipend to the nurse to be our health coordinator, head of health services, and she also watches over the program, but it's paid by the trust.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else have questions for Tony? If not, Melanie, anything you would like to add from the last meeting or anything you'd like to clarify?
I'll be brief, but thank you for the opportunity to speak tonight. I just want to remind people that we're going into a territory of unknown at this point, and you know, while I know that everybody is stretched thin, whether you're a taxpayer, whether you're running the education budget or the town budget, you know, I want to remind people that our budget is a no-frills budget. The budget was collaboratively developed. The budget does manage to uphold both organizations in their current capacity, which for kids, that basically comes down to making sure that their programming, their staffing, and their educational experiences that they're used to can be maintained. I'm hopeful that our Board of Selectmen will continue to support education here within the town of Winchester by supporting our budget requests. I'm happy to answer any questions if anyone has any, but again, I'm just going to reiterate that I know we're asking right now, what I'm asking because we need this right now. Thank you.
Does anyone have any questions for Melanie? One thing that I just wanted to make sure we brought out is that in the past, since 2015, that we have been putting money in the town support for education line. I know that everybody talks about the MBR line, but we have been supporting education. Last year, we had added another $150,000 to that account to bring it up to a total of $480,000 for education. Also, we have spent a couple $100,000 on the Hinsdale renovation plan and continue to do that, and that there will be more money spent with the schools with that from the public. So we didn't want that to get lost. A lot of times there's this conversation about the MBR line, but we want to make sure that those other lines are on there as well. Anyone else? Bob?
I mean, I've said this before, I'm beginning to sound like a broken record. We've got duplication in our administration line, which is excessive. We have 2 school superintendents, 2 administrative staffs. We've got an education model that was based on a growing international student base, which has diminished and almost disappeared. We've got excessive capital structure costs. I feel there's a broken financial model, a broken business model for the school, and now I see the PPP program as duplication of taxpayers' money, and I cannot support paying any increase in the education budget. If anything, the budget should be reduced by a few percentage, not increased by anything.
Is there anything on the town side, Bob?
The town side, we've continued, I think, running awfully tight. We've been slowly making repairs. We were behind for our road situation has been behind for years. Last year we spent $2.5 million. This year we're trying to spend at least that much again. We need to spend several million to get it completely up to par. We're creeping our way back up there and making significant repairs. We haven't done anything with the sidewalks. We've tried to chase every grant we can find. In terms of town equipment, we've slowly been replacing on a regular schedule. We're still replacing 20-year-old pieces of equipment that we drive frequently in public works. We're slowly gaining our police cruisers. So I don't believe we're being excessive on anything we put forward. We have reduced our anticipated expenditures given this financial situation with the COVID coming at us.
Any questions for Bob from the board?
I just had one comment. Bob used that there are 2 superintendents. There's 1.5.
Are you paid by both the trust and the school corp, or just one or the other?
I am paid by both in separate contracts.
So does that total equal more than what Melanie, that we pay her?
No idea what Melanie makes.
Yeah, well, she makes about 160 as public information. I think our excessive cost for duplication in school superintendents is ridiculous for 1,000 students.
I just wanted to point out the FTE is 1.5.
All right, but Tony, do you receive any benefits from the Gilbert School contract?
Benefits.
Like health insurance?
No, I actually am a retiree and I have Medicare.
How about annuities?
Annuity.
Annuities through the Gilbert Corporation or the trust?
Yeah, both those are shared by the trust has half and the Gilbert School has half.
I'm sorry, but this is a shell game, and you people have got to stop doing this. You are ripping off our taxpayers, and it needs to stop.
We're talking about the 2021 budget, so let's keep focused on it.
I'll shut my mouth. Go ahead.
Candy, I have a question for you.
Okay, Jack?
Candy, I have a question for you. I'd like to hear what other people want to say, and then I'd like to come back to before you move on to the next item on the budget, some more discussion about this. But before I make some comments, I want to see if there's anybody else who's listening in, has some comments.
Jack, I'm moving the meeting around along here, so I have something to do along those lines. So I will ask that question. Thank you.
Okay, but I will make a comment about.
Right, and after I do what I have to do with a comment from the public that we received by email today, then I will come to you first. All right, so as I said, we were going to the superintendents and town manager first. If there's any questions for Bob on the town side of the budget. All right, we did receive one comment that was emailed in. It was from Ellen Marino. She's a member of the Gilbert School Trust. Her name, and I'm just gonna read the letter out to you. My name is Ellen Marino, grew up in Winston, graduated from the Gilbert School, and after law school decided to set up my practice in this town that I cherished 28 years ago. I'm a member of the Gilbert Board of Education and the Gilbert Trust. I'm writing to you as a parent and a taxpayer. First, I wish to thank each of you for your service to the town. I appreciate your efforts during these difficult and unprecedented times. It is incredibly taxing to try to conduct an open meeting process in a time of social isolation. I'm disappointed that as a taxpayer I cannot vote on the budget this year, but do appreciate your allowing public comment. I do not envy your position. This is a truly unique and stressful year. Since the taxpayers cannot vote on the budget this year, it's totally in your hands. You will set the tone for this town by your actions. I believe you all ran for public office because you have a strong desire to serve in the town's best interest. Many of you have a very long history in the town, and I think going forward we have to be cognizant of our past and act prudently to protect our future. You are in uncharted waters, and you are in a position to send a message to your constituency that I hope to be one of positivity and unite with foresight into the unknown. It appears to me the only issue of contention with the Winchester proposed budget is education. This is not unusual for Winchester. There is a discrepancy of $240,301 between the Winchester Board of Education and the town manager's proposed budget. The town manager is proposing cutting education so there will be no increase in taxes. As a taxpayer, I appreciate the town manager's commitment to keep taxes stable. However, the town manager has no authority to cut the education budget. That is only a decision you, as the Board of Selectmen, can make, and I would caution you in making any cuts to the education budget, particularly in a year where taxpayers cannot vote, because cutting education will send the wrong message to the residents, students, parents, and taxpayers of Winchester, and also because our immediate future is full of uncertainty. We are living history. Far too many years, various local boards and voters have not supported education in Winston. This led to an exodus of families leaving town, many moving to surrounding towns, primarily because of dysfunction of the Winchester Public Schools District. The long-term history of the Winchester Public Schools has not been positive. There were years of fiscal mismanagement and lack of transparency, which resulted in the town WBOE going into receivership and protracted litigation with a superintendent that cost the taxpayers dearly. However, like a phoenix being reborn from the ashes, the town appears to be moving in the right direction, both on the education side of the budget and town side. On the town side, there are signs of growth with new businesses, new construction, enforcement of blighted properties, and improvement to the infrastructure. Our bond rating has been restored. With a slight increase in the grand list, the needle is moving in the right direction. On the school side, there is room for improvement, but overall, I believe it too is heading in the right direction. There is still conflict between Winchester board members and the perception of Gilbert. Recently, there has been much misinformation transmitted in social media and newsprint about Gilbert and the payroll protection program. There have been personal attacks made by WBOE members against the Gilbert board members and our superintendent, which are unfounded and frankly offensive. We have WBOE members who clearly do not like Gilbert and continue to engage in negativity about the school no matter what the issue. There will always be people who disagree, but I believe it should be done respectfully. You never see any Gilbert board or trust members personally attacking Winston board members in meetings or on social media. This kind of behavior breeds negativity at a time when we need unity. Every Gilbert board member and trust member is a resident of Winchester and a taxpayer. All are volunteers. The WBOE was recently restored to power post-receivership and is headed in the right direction, fortunately with the help of influx of money from the state of Connecticut. However, 1 year does not a trend make. It takes time to heal all damage that took years to create, and believe the healing has begun. The Gilbert board vetted the PPP program with its attorneys and auditors prior to applying for the loan/grant. The bank officer processed the application, the SBA approved it, and went through the proper process. There's absolutely no double dipping or double taxation going on. If one chooses to follow that logic, then any grant that the town receives from the state could also be considered double dipping or double taxation. Budgets are fluid, that's the nature of budgets. This is unanticipated revenue that will be used for its intended purpose, payroll and benefits, and if forgiven, will result in a grant. This could possibly result in unused or unexpended line items that would be adjusted to help deal with the impact the COVID-19 situation will have on the next fiscal year. This will ultimately benefit each of the sending districts. Some WBOE members' outward negativity towards Gilbert sends the wrong message to the town. Gilbert is in the process of examining its administrative structure. As a taxpayer, I would urge Winchester to do the same. The WBOE budget request for fiscal 2021 is $20,201,987. That is the total budget for the entire K-12 system, but let's break it down a bit. The K-6 system in wages and benefits alone is $8.6 million. That is $1.4 million more than the Gilbert Middle School and Gilbert High School's entire budget. Gilbert has a part-time superintendent. Winchester has a full-time superintendent. Should Winchester consider a part-time superintendent? I don't know if that's the right model, but it should be explored because then we would have one full-time equivalent in the overall K-12 budget. If we remove Gilbert's entire budget from the WBOE budget, Winchester is still left with $13,022,594 to run the K-6 district. This includes transportation and special ed for K-12. So if we back out those line items, the K-6 system still has over $9.6 million to run its district. As a taxpayer, I would argue there's a surplus of money in the WBOE budget since middle school, high school education is typically more expensive than elementary ed. One could argue that the WBOE is taking away from Gilbert, but I don't agree with that rationale. Personally, I don't think either district is taking away from each other. I believe both districts work diligently to do what's in the best interest of the respective districts because both districts support education. We are one town and these are all the same kids. In a historical crisis year when both superintendents work collaboratively on a budget, cutting education is sending the wrong message. Let these people do their job. Melanie Bradley Shanley attended Gilbert's budget meeting and Dr. Anthony Serio attended Winchester's budget meeting. Both boards went through their arduous budget process and both boards passed their respective budgets with passionate discussion and scrutiny. This is exactly what I believe this town desires and deserves. The town went through a contentious debate about the Hinsdale School renovation and narrowly passed a vote to renovate the school. This is a town that supports education. Again, let our superintendents do their job, trust the process. Send the right message to your constituency. Support your town manager, Robert Geiger, for the side of the budget. I personally believe Mr. Geiger is doing a wonderful job as town manager. Support your superintendent, Melanie Bradley Shanley, for the education side of the budget. Pass the budget in the amount of $34,658,487 and set the tone for positivity and unity in this unprecedented year. Ellen Marino, May 18th, 2020. Jack, you're up.
So on our Thursday hearing, I asked a couple of questions, first from Melanie and Dr. Serio about if the budget was cut $240,000, have you talked about how much money that would mean and what that would mean to each of your districts and maybe even programs? Bob, I asked you the same question. What could we do? And the answer was not cutting taxes or not interested in adding more money to the mill rate, but looking at the programs that we have running for the town government side of the budget. Come Thursday, our Board of Selectmen, the 7 of us, have an awesome responsibility to take on the responsibility that taxpayers throughout the years that we've been writing budgets in this town will not have. In that responsibility, we must make the right decisions for those people who cannot vote, who cannot go to a referendum and vote something in, vote something down, and force us back into doing something different. We must make that decision, the 7 of us. We could add money to the budget. We could subtract money from the budget. We could do all kinds of things that would help taxpayers in being able to afford the next tax year. I have said right along that I never wanted to see an additional taxes, a tax increase, and I will remain in that position. But I would like to make a motion, And I can only do this with the support of the rest of the board, because one selectman can't request this to happen. I would like to make a motion to have the town manager come to us on Thursday with a priority of items, maybe 5 to 7 items that could be reduced from the government budget to the total amount of $240,000. That doesn't mean I'm going to vote for that. That doesn't mean we're putting the money back in. But I would like to see what that would mean if we were to eliminate $240,000 of expenses in the town government budget. Because we in fact may be able to, at that point, cut the budget by $240,000.
Jack, if you're making a motion, please make the motion.
The motion is, I would like to have the town manager come to the board on Thursday at the meeting on Thursday with a proposal of budgetary items that could be reduced to the amount of $240,000 in the government budget.
Is there a
If
second?
there's a second to that, we'll talk about it.
Not seeing a second. Jack, are there any other things you want to say?
Well, and we could still make those decisions on Thursday to cut the budget additional $240,000. We could still make the decision on Thursday to add $240,000. I just would like to see what that would mean if we did these kinds of things. I'm sorry there's no second to that, but in order to make a decision, I would need some information that only the town manager can provide. I can go through the budget and cut items here, cut items there to the amount of $240,000, but I'm not the executive officer. Bob is, and in his role, just as he was in business, a board can direct that person to go in and find cuts in a budget, and then in that role, when you were in business, you would have to come back and show where some of these items would be, and the effect of those items. That's all I'm asking for. I'm sorry I didn't get a second on that.
Any other board member have any comments at this point? I'd just like to make a couple. One, there were some comments made that we were cutting education. We are not cutting education. We are just not, at this point, there is not the adding of additional money. We are not cutting the money that happened this past year. I am still concerned about that $100,000 that was added on July 1st without any Board of Ed or Board of Selectmen involvement, and it was something that went to the taxpayers. That is something that I'm still looking at. Last year, I specifically asked at the education hearing that we take a look at the superintendents, as was also just suggested by the comment that I just read to all of you. I was talking about what the benefit, I was asking to look at administrative costs by combining superintendencies based on the fact that I know Mr. Serio is retiring at the end of this year. Mrs. Bradley Shanley, working under K6, has done such a great job. And then just my view of how that could all work, and not only just saving tax dollars, but also looking at the fact that we would have a seamless pre-K to 21 system. The curriculum would flow nicely. There would be efficiencies between the grade levels. There would be efficiency within some of the programs that could be made. So I'm still an advocate for that. But I think I heard something the other day, and I know that it was also mentioned that there's a committee to look at administration at the Gilbert School. And out of that committee, I guess, the discussion that was going to be that the Gilbert School would be going to the regional school district to ask them if they wanted to share in the superintendency, like Wamogo and Litchfield. And to me, I'm not understanding why looking at the pre-K to 6th grade being served by one person wouldn't be more advantageous for the students here in town, taxpayers that are here in town, and the entire school system. So I talked about that last year, And here we are again this year, looking at budgets when we know the cost of administration and what we have to do. So one of the things that I know for sure, and I'll say this about getting ready for the COVID-19 response. You know, the PPP that y'all talk about and stuff like that, I'm sure that you've all done your legal research and everything's legal about that. And I'm not gonna belabor that point. I'm still gonna worry about the fact that we're paying tuition to pay for teachers, and I don't know how many people got laid off, if anybody got laid off, but Winston taxpayer is still paying that amount of money. So I'm still gonna worry about that. But I'm gonna worry about the COVID response, because I know that could put a lot of strain on the schools next year. And it appears that with the money from PPP and our tax dollars, it seems like the response, and also Melanie saying last week $191,000 would be shared between the BOE and the Gilbert School. I'm assuming that most of the COVID would probably be taken care of on the 712 side. I am a little concerned about that transportation that Melanie was talking about if we had to do double sessions at $300 a run. So I was a little concerned about that and what we could do with that. So I'm just gonna throw it out there that perhaps on the Board of Selectmen side of the budget, the town budget with Bob, if we couldn't have a COVID response line item that would be funded, that would be available to help with transportation costs, if there were any, for the schools next year, where the school would come to us and ask us to cover the COVID response, the transportation, which is the big nut, because there's gotta be like, I'm gonna guess there's gotta be like at least 10 runs, so $3,000 a day or something like that. Until we know the answers. And if we have it, and if we need to release it, we release it, and if not, it would be there at the end of the year. So I'm gonna probably ask more questions about that on Thursday.
Are you asking Candy to add additional money to the 2021 budget?
Additional money? No, I believe the mill rate needs to remain even where it is now.
Well, you're asking for a line item for COVID response and put some money in that line item? Where would that money come from?
There's a line item in the budget, there's a couple of them. There's a line item in the budget for, in case we didn't get state grants, we could use that money as the line item for just in case transportation, and not have that cushion for state grants. We could hold off on a couple of the capital items until maybe January. I'll run some of those things out until January. If we haven't used the COVID response money, then we would be able to purchase what wanted to be purchased, or wait until the next fiscal year on those. So that's where I would look to, in my mind, knowing the budget as well as I think I do, but not everything, but as well as I do, that's where I would look to it first.
If we put these line items in there, if we put that money in there, it's got to show a balance of income versus expenditure. And if we're still going to do that in that way that you're suggesting, we're still looking at a budget that's going to have some kind of a tax increase.
No, it's not, Jack.
Uh,
Not if you cut a capital item, or not if you use that cushion in that line.
Well, that's probably what I was asking for in my motion, to see if we could cut some things. And now you're saying, well, go ahead and do it anyway. I don't quite understand why you weren't supportive of my motion, and now you want to do this. It just seems to me it's almost the same thing.
Well, I'm not making a motion, I'm saying what I would be talking about on Thursday.
Well, then it has to come as a motion to the board and make that decision. I'd like to see that.
You mean a motion to the board right now? No, it'll be a motion on Thursday.
Well, but don't we need to direct Bob to show us how that would impact the different lines? And I'd like to see that impact before I vote.
I would assume that Bob and Bruce would be able to come to the hearing. I bet if we asked them now, they would be able to tell us that too. And it's really, the budget impact is clear. If you're gonna hold the mill rate, then something has to be cut. And if something has to be cut, it's like, what are you gonna choose to cut? You're gonna cut a road? Are you gonna cut, the, thing for capital works, a snowplow? Are you going to go into the purchasing agent and cut there? Are you gonna cut the new hire in public works? Are you gonna go into, I don't know, Board of Selectmen contingency and cut some money from that? Are you gonna go into the Winchester 250 and cut some money from that, public
Well,
celebrations?
that's why I was asking Bob to show us a list of items that he thinks in priority can amount to $250,000, $240,000. That's all I was asking for, priority items.
Yes, that's what you were asking for. You made a motion, and I'm not making a motion. I would just telling the board what I think I'm thinking towards, so I'm just doing that. I'm not asking anybody to go on and do anything specific right now.
And our decision is still the awesome decision that we have to make for every taxpayer who can't vote when we do meet on Thursday on this.
I do believe that everybody sitting on this board understands that. I mean, we tried really hard to have a public vote. It wasn't our board that decided not to have the public vote. This was the governor and his mandate to the cities and towns that got clarified by CCM and cost when we were in the middle of trying to figure out.
I know you tried
how to do it.
But we're still left with this decision that we have to make.
Right, and Jack, we've had, these boards, we've been fortunate that we've been able to make decisions the way we've made them. I've been around when we've had to make equally as hard decisions in the past, when we were actually cutting people by $5, $50, $100, cutting people's jobs. So yeah, we do have an awesome responsibility, but we have it each and every year. This is a very, I think that's why we all want to keep the mill rate even right now, is because we want to make sure that we're supporting the public during this time, that there's not going to be a tax increase. And however that all shakes out with our votes on Thursday, I'm imagining we're all going to be in that same spot. Maybe I'm wrong, but we'll know that for sure.
Well, I have said right along that I am not in favor of any kind of a tax increase, but I am in favor of finding ways to see if we can adjust the budgets in some way. I'm not sure at this point, because I don't have enough information that it's possible to do that. And I'm not sure I would support the kind of move that you're suggesting you would make. But I would like to see some information from our executive officer of what could be done. That's, again, and I'm not interested in that just 2 minutes before I'm going to vote. That's why I wanted it ahead of time.
I'm just going to switch subjects for a minute to Bruce and Bob. Remember, you need to bring those line items on Thursday for the reduction out of the budget of the income for the town clerk and building, I believe it was, and the removal of one of the positions for public works. So we'll need to vote on those specific line items. Does anybody else on the rest of the board have any comments? I would encourage all of you that are on the board, you can talk to Bob and Bob privately about what things could look like if you'd like to do that. Or, you can talk to Bob about the areas that you're thinking about moving money around and the impact on that, if you have some thoughts on that. But if not,
I've encouraged all 7 of you to come talk to me anytime, every week, whenever you'd like. You know that I'm always available for that.
Right. So,
And you know, Bob, that I have done that constantly. And so we are in constant conversation about reductions and stuff like that. That's, I just wanted to make it.
And increases, Jack.
And increases, I know that. I just wanted to have the board.
I understand what you want.
Okay.
Okay, so, is everybody on the board ready to move on to item 11A? Okay, well, I'd like to thank Tony and Melanie for being available as always. You're welcome to stay on the Zoom call here. If not, and you go, because I know your days are still very busy, probably even more so with everything going on, you're more than welcome to fade off into the background. But we're gonna be moving on to 11A, which is easement request at 80 South Main Street. Bob?
Yeah, let me explain. This has to do with the new hospital. The hospital, as you know, is erecting a helicopter pad in the rear of the building, and its flight path comes over the cemetery. And even though it's a helicopter, flight paths, even for helicopters, are more like a normal airplane approach. And the approach will go over no residents at all, only the cemetery, which is town land. So they're concerned about potential future encroachment upon that right-of-way. So currently, they'd like to request an easement to maintain a minimum clearance over the tree line. They need at least anything above 40 feet. Any tree would have to be trimmed. We don't have anything close to that in that area right now. And it's highly unlikely that anyone's going to erect a cell tower, any obstruction in that flight path. The FAA doesn't even require it, but the owner of the building would like to have it just in case. Who knows what would happen in the future if somebody wants to build something that would encroach upon their airspace. So I see no issue whatsoever in granting them an easement for flying over the cemetery in order to approach their helicopter pad. So that's what this whole easement's about. There are more engineering drawings in there that you would care to see. Everything has been vetted on this and approved by their attorney, our attorney. Everything's been evaluated. So I think we're safe to grant them an easement. So I'm requesting that you would do so.
So we're on the first step where we would send it to planning and zoning?
Correct. This is just like a purchase or sale of a property. So this proceeds to P&Z. Does not have to go to the wetlands. It does not affect the wetlands, but it needs to go to P&Z.
So the easement really isn't on the ground as much as the airspace?
It's more the airspace. But we're not quite like New York City yet, where you can actually sell the airspace above your building. But this is all about airspace as much as anything.
Steve?
I move that the Board of Selectmen refer the easement request at 80 South Main Street to the Planning and Zoning Commission for review and comment.
Thank you. Is there a second? Candace, thank you. Any discussion on it? Jack?
Bob, on one of the pages that was sent to you from LADA, PLC Corporation, the back page, it says the grantee desires the town provide the right to clear or prune any vegetation which grows above the reference elevation. That would also mean in the future, right? So that over the next 20, 30, 40 years, if trees come to the height that would interfere with the landing, we don't have any responsibility for cutting those, even though it's on our land. It will be entirely up to this organization to cut them.
We just have to grant them permission.
Well, aren't we granting them permission in this?
We are, because this is called easeway maintenance. That's part of the easement.
Okay, so in the future, 30 years from now, none of us are here, trees are growing high. We had this situation at the Soldiers Monument when trees began growing higher there, and they were coming into the heliport at the hospital, and they had to do a different flight pattern around those. So I just want to make sure that the future, we're never going to be responsible for cutting any of those trees down.
No, that's called easement maintenance. They're allowed to do that once we grant this.
Are there any other questions by anyone? Just speak up if you do, because I'm zooming through a document right now. Or moving through a document, not zooming. Should use the right words. Let's see. Okay, so this is the, steps for sale of town-owned property, or in this case, the easement. So we're in number 1, that we determine it's in the best interest of the town. If we do, it goes to the planning and zoning, and anybody else that would be needed. And then it'll come back from their reports to us, and then we would continue to move with the easement, or we would stop if it was not something that we should support. Is there a motion on, did we do a motion on this? You put in, we have to
Yes.
vote on it, right? So,
Yes.
any other discussion on it? All in favor of moving it to planning and zoning, please raise your hands. Okay, thank you. Unanimous? In case you didn't see that, Sheila.
Yes, thank you.
You go back up to the top of the budget, I believe.
Transfer.
Yep, let me just get to it, because I'm showing it to the public at the same time. If you're on the Zoom meeting, you may not see that. So what I'm trying to do is have the public see us and the agenda at the same time. So, we proposed line item transfer, Bob, that would be you.
Yes, I've only got one this evening. It's only for $150 in the senior center. I'd like to move $150 from healthy aging programs to training and education. So the total transfer would be $150. I move this board of select approve this line item transfer.
May I have a motion? Jack? Is there a second? Melissa, thank you. Any discussion? All in favor? Unanimous, thank you. 11C is the refunds as recommended by the Collector of Revenues, our usual monthly action item. Bob?
Yes, we have approximately, I think, the first line item transfers for motor vehicles. I'm not going to cite each one, but they total $648.19. So there were 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 particular motor vehicle tax bills involved here, and I recommend that you approve this refund.
Right, may I have a motion to approve? Todd, thank you. Is there a second? Thank you, Linda. All in favor? Unanimous, thank you.
And I now have just the second part of that is just for a total of 6 refunds for a total of $148 on real estate, some for as low as $5 and one as high as $26. So I recommend you approve $148.35 for that refund for those 6 properties.
Candace, thank you. Jack, I'll give you the second. Any discussion on those? All in favor? Okay, thank you. Unanimous, Sheila?
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Bob. It brings us to citizens' comments. If anyone would like to make any comments, please call us at 860-738-6958. Again, 860-738-6958. Or anybody on the Zoom could also. It's a citizen comment. You have 3 minutes and you may speak once during this round. I see a Brian. Brian, could you please,
Brian Sunday, 152
Okay.
Spencer Hill Road.
oh, it must have been the beard. I didn't know you were in the tiny little spot there.
I just had a question, and maybe I misunderstood it last week, and I'm hoping that maybe Bob could just explain. Is there a $50,000 line item for windows at Soldiers Monument? Did I see that correct? And,
Yes, you
what,
did.
can you just explain what that's for, and I'll be done? Thanks.
Okay, the Soldiers Monument has been under renovation for several years. The Soldiers Monument Commission, their next phase is replacement. The windows are in pretty bad shape. In order to maintain the integrity of that building and the interior, it's going to be necessary to replace those windows and frames.
It's the second year. Last year was, this current year we're in is $50,000 as well in the capital item, and this is an additional 50.
Brian, if you would like additional information on that, as also the chairman of the Soldiers Monument Commission, I can fill you in on some of the work that we've been doing up there.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I guess my just general comment when I saw that last week, and we're talking about cutting all sorts of things, and I just saw $50,000 for windows. And, part of me just wondered, could we spend a little less than that? But I don't know if it's a long-term commitment. You have to spend the 50. But to Jack's point earlier about creating a list of things you could trim, I guess that's just something that sort of stuck out to me. And I love Soldiers Monument. I spend a fair amount of time there, but I was just curious, was looking for more info. I appreciate it.
Okay, thank you.
And one of the things I'd like to share, since we're talking about the windows, and they are dear to my heart because of the work we've been doing on them, I have worked with Marvin Windows, have contacted the CEO of Marvin Windows, and they have referred me to the local representative to see if we can get reductions in their cost to the windows, if we can get some maybe even donations instead of full cost for the windows. The windows on the second and third floor are more expensive because they are cathedral type windows. They have a point to them, and in order to fit the windows, they're not just rectangular, they're just a little bit more expensive. But we are going to be doing, I think it's 21 windows, and we should have them completed by the end of this year. And that extra $50,000 coming in the 2021 budget will help to do that. Now, we also have been given some really nice donations from people throughout our years, and so we have some extra money in case it goes over. But as I said, I've been working with the contractors to try to bring that price down.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Are there any other citizens' comments? Any other citizens' comments? If not, I'll move on to 13, Selectmen's comments and reports. Anyone? Todd?
So I had a whole 2-page statement all written out. I'm not going to read that. I'm going to do everyone a favor. If we look back 8 weeks ago, the proposed budget's no-brainer. The economy was roaring. The grand list was growing. Things were going pretty good. I looked it up. Winchester's employment rate back then in early March was 3.9%. What's happened since then? The economy has crashed. April's unemployment numbers aren't out yet for Winsted, but national average is 14.7%. Businesses were closed. Employees were laid off. They were furloughed. Residents are having trouble paying for food, getting food with some of the shortages that are going around. Landlords aren't collecting rent. Not only that, but some of the residents can't pay their rent because they're not working and they haven't worked for 8 weeks. Businesses have closed or had their operations limited. And what's that going to look like if some of these businesses are not able to reopen? We need to keep that in mind before we propose raising any more. I'm not against raising taxes, but if we move money around, we need to keep that in mind. Bob did cut some things out of the town budget. We need to not forget about that. There were some positions eliminated in the budget that he proposed for us. So he didn't just cut down some of the funding for the school from what they wanted. He also did it for the town. We need to make sure we remember that. Last September, we asked the town to support the Hinsdale renovations. We made some promises there. We showed our support, and the town backed us with that support. So it's not like we are, abandoning the educational system. We need to think about all of this first before we, do something crazy. That could mean, we put some money, as Candace or as Jack and Candy talked about, maybe moving some money around, we need to think long and hard about the actions that we take, because this is unprecedented territory. And lastly, we haven't heard a lot from people around town. Now is your chance. Get your comments in. You know, send it in the mail, send it through the email, leave the phone calls to Bob or Lori. But we really need to hear from the residents. We don't want to hear after we vote. We need to hear now, between now and Wednesday. And that's all I have.
Well, Todd, you're like on cue because two people just came into the meeting. I don't think they realized that we went past citizens' comments. But I'm going to go back to citizens' comments, and I just want to these are citizens' comments on our regular agenda. So it will be, we welcome public comments, but speakers will be limited to 3 minutes or less and may speak only once during this round. So I only know one of the people's names. So if the phone number person could identify yourself to Pam on the backside, so your name could be down there. So I'll go to Mr. Kaczynski first, and then I'll go to the phone number once we know who you are.
Yeah, sorry for coming in late, but I had a medical issue. I had briefly stopped in to see Candace Bouchard, and I had spoken to a couple of people in town prior. Concerning the situation with the Hinsdale School, we just had St. Anthony shut down because of serious financial difficulty, plus the fact that they don't have the enrollments that they once have. My question would be to, as Candace said, the melody is, and including Mr. Geiger, is the simple fact is, instead of pursuing the present course and trying to get the Hinsdale restored, what about buying St. Anthony's? I mean, they have a gymnasium that's less than 8 years old. They have a priory that is fairly new and which could be used as the Board of Education office. And the teaching facility of St. Anthony is in relatively high condition. So if St. Anthony's were to sell it to the town and or lease it or rent it to us, that would fulfill the particular need of having a third facility to teach children in. And thus relieving the fact that do we need to really get into a situation where we're going to spend X amount of money and bonding on top of the situation to hang up unnecessary amount of money around the necks of the taxpayers. Anyway, as an alternative, you have a facility there that is doable, and as Mr. Geiger and I know, sailors as we both are, we never let anything go to waste. We are practical individuals, which includes those of us that may have been stranded at sea. We don't even leave the need for our fellow seamen to be dumped over the side. If necessary, we may have to resort to cannibalism. Now that's tough to take, but it has happened, and we've seen it in a few of the movies. It is true. It happened with the Essex, the whaling vessel out of New Bedford. So I think if we have a facility, again, that's viable, usable, and we don't have to go through a deep expense into the pockets of the taxpayers, something as an alternative, I think that needs to be very seriously looked at. Thank you for your time.
Okay, thank you for your time. It seemed that the phone number was also Mr. Kaczynski, so we'll go back to Selectmen's comments. I know Jack had his hand up before.
Yes, let me share with all of you and the town and anybody who's listening that the Soldiers Monument Commission will be conducting a virtual Memorial Day ceremony. We have been doing filming of many of the things that we normally do during the ceremony at the East End Park. There are two students that, former students, Dylan Avery and Cash Pack have helped us tremendously putting a film together that we will post first on the Soldiers Monument website and Facebook, and then everywhere else I can post it on Facebook pages, on YouTube pages with links to that. It will be about a 25-minute ceremony, and it includes a Memorial Day poem, it includes a Memorial Day address, and the reading of the 116 names of the soldiers that have died in the various wars. Included in this will also be photography and video of wreath laying, as we have normally done at all of the 5 monuments in town. So I want to encourage people to be aware that this is happening, to be on the lookout to the notifications that come up about the link. We don't have the links set up yet, but it will be the town's virtual 2020 Memorial Day ceremony. And in that ceremony, we want to keep it as focused as we have done in the past. Additionally, we have asked area churches here in town and around town to join together and at noon on Memorial Day, next Monday, to ring their church bells. I talked about maybe some other bells, but I think this would be most appropriate if the church bells were ringing on noon on Memorial Day. So even though we can't have it live, we are going to continue with the the ceremony that we have conducted for the past several years. And I hope people are able to watch it. Once it's up, it will be up forever, because it doesn't go down. So it will be there, and we hope to have it posted Sunday evening in anticipation of Memorial Day on Monday.
Jack, thank you for your work on that. I know that it will not be the same as being there in person, but it's going to be as close as it can get, so thank you. Candace?
Also a reminder that on the Sunday at 8 o'clock, to assist with the veterans for placing the flags at the cemeteries.
Right, and just, yeah, and remember, there'll be old people like me there, so please wear masks and social distance, because we're fragilities now, so, fragile, so.
The other point I want to make is I'd like to still make a request to find out what our road plans are for the spring. And so that could be posted as the news item for residents, so that they know what to expect going forward.
Okay. Anyone else on the board? If not, Steve?
Move we adjourn?
May I have a second? I'm looking for a hand. Melissa, thank you. All in favor? Unanimous? Okay, just so everybody knows, Thursday is a special meeting of the Board of Selectmen. We will live stream it, and we will be on channel 194. Okay, thank you. Good night.
Good night.